Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest AITA Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from Throwaway Electrical Dashboard AITA for telling my 19F daughter she will have to move out of my house if I get divorced because of her lies after her stepdad saw her naked. My husband and I have been married for a little over 5 years now. I will say my daughter, 19F, and he have an okay relationship. Not exactly father and daughter, but almost an advice asked and given relationship, basically. I have never picked up on anything weird from my husband towards my daughter. And my daughter has never said or insinuated anything at all as well. On Thursday, my husband and I were watching a movie in the living room. We paused the movie as he got up to use the bathroom. I heard him knocking on the door twice. Literally 3 knocks each time on the door, a couple of seconds apart. It was loud enough for me to hear him knocking from the living room. The next moment, I heard screaming. I rushed to the bathroom and saw my daughter completely naked, covering herself, and yelling at my husband to get out. I didn't see everything that happened, but what I saw after I heard yelling was my husband literally falling over his own feet and struggling to get the bathroom door closed. I asked my husband what happened, and he said he knocked. Nobody answered, so he went in, and my daughter was naked in front of the mirror, and he tried to get out. After my daughter calmed down, I asked her side of what happened, and she said she was changing, and all of a sudden, my husband walked into the bathroom. I asked her why she didn't answer him when he knocked. She said he didn't. I told her I heard him knock, so I am sure that he did. She said she didn't hear it because she had her ear pods in, listening to music. We got the situation sorted, and my husband did apologize to her and explained he thought the bathroom was empty and walked in. She even gave him a hug and apologized for yelling at him. The problem now is, my daughter got family members involved, and they are now calling my husband a creep. I got a call from my sister, berating me for still having my husband in the house. I asked what she meant, and it came out that my daughter spun a whole other story and left out the fact that she was listening to music with her earpods and is telling everyone that she answered him, and he still walked into the bathroom to look at her. We have cameras in our hallway, and it proves that my husband did knock, as you can see it on the video, but the cameras have no audio. I sat my daughter down and asked her, and she denied saying anything like that, or that she told anyone anything. I got mad and asked then, how does your aunt know what happened? And she went silent. She said she talked to her niece about it, and she must have told her mother. I asked her why she lied about what happened and made my husband look bad when he did nothing wrong. She again denied lying about anything, and I told her what my sister told me. She just started to cry and say sorry. She was just talking and making up scenarios with her niece. The whole day yesterday, I got calls and texts from my family members as the story spread. The wrong story is spreading, and my husband is looking like a creep to everyone. I sat my daughter down again and had her read some of the things being said about my husband, and told her she has to fix this because her lying is what caused this. She refused, saying she didn't spread this, and she only told her niece and doesn't want to say anything to anyone because they will think bad about her. She said they know my husband, and this will just blow over. Everything did blow up when my husband walked into the living room with his bags packed and said he is going to stay with his parents for a while because he doesn't want to be in this situation anymore where he is made out to be this kind of person. My daughter broke down and apologized repeatedly and said she will fix it, but my husband still left. I told her if I get divorced because of her lies, she will be moving out of my house. I told her she better fix what she did and tell everyone what really happened, because I will not be losing a man that loves and actually cares for me, like my husband does over lies. She asked me to help her, and I told her no, she isn't a child anymore, and her lies for attention did this. This is on her. I already tried. And I'm now also being accused of taking my husband's side and not providing a safe space for my daughter. I don't know what to do. My husband asked for space, and my daughter is inconsolable at the moment. I am not in the best state myself. OP is not an AH for being harsh to her daughter. OP's daughter is an AH for not apologizing for her mistake of not locking the door while taking shower. As for scores, I would rate OP's daughter 2.5 out of 5, and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from Practice Complete 1. AITA for only paying for one of my daughter's weddings and down payment. I, 50M, have 3 kids. Sarah, 35F, Jessica, 25F, and Ben, 23M. My wife and I had Sarah when we were both 16. It wasn't easy, but with both our parents' support, we could finish college while we raised her. When it was time for her to go to college, we didn't have the money to help her. So, she took out loans and paid for them herself. We learned from our mistakes and started saving for her siblings Jessica and Ben, who got around a $100K college fund and had no debt. Through all of this, Sarah never complained. She finished her education, got a fantastic job, and could repay the loans in just 3 years, while staying with us to save as much as possible. She has also helped us a lot with babysitting her younger siblings, and has always been selfless and helped out in any way she could, maybe even to a fault. So when she told me 5 years ago she was getting married, I talked to my wife and told her how bad I felt we never did anything for her, and that I wanted to give her the inheritance I got from my grandmother, which was around $50K, to help pay for her wedding and down payment on the house. Luckily, my wife agreed. And even though she didn't really need it, I know it meant a lot to her. The issue is this. Jessica is getting married next year, and had assumed we would plan a similar gift for her. She was quite surprised when I told her that we never discussed such plans, and even if we wanted to, we didn't have the budget for it. She told us it wasn't fair that we paid for her sister, but would not do the same for her. I tried to explain the situation, telling her that in the long run, we spend twice as much on her and her brother as we ever did on Sarah. However, she insisted that Sarah was already well off, noting that Sarah and her husband had paid off their house and were doing extremely well financially. I told her that this had nothing to do with how much money her sister had. This was us finally being able to do something for our oldest child, who had to sacrifice so much because we had her at such a young age. She didn't take it well, left angry, and won't speak to us. My wife thinks we should maybe take out a small loan and give her the money because she isn't used to not talking to her kids and is sad she is being left out of the wedding preparations. She is even afraid of us not getting invited to the wedding. But I have put my foot down and won't budge because she is not entitled to our money. Now even Sarah is saying that this is getting out of hand and even offered to help pay half the money. But personally, I'm at a point where I'd rather burn the $50K than give it to her. Sarah and my wife think that this is not worth destroying our family over, but I think that giving in will only make her more entitled in the long run. Update. Thank you all for the fantastic comments and personal messages from my last post. After reading the comments, I felt even more convinced that I was in the right, so I sat down with my wife to talk. Following many of your suggestions, I showed her the post and asked her to read it. She wasn't happy, especially when she saw how many people had read it, but she was also really curious. This has been on her mind a lot lately, and she wanted to know what all of you were thinking. She had a few issues with my comments. She believes that when I said I would rather burn the money, it indicates I need to change my approach to problem solving. While it might be easy for people on the internet to suggest that parents cut off contact with their child, she is not ready to lose her little girl. Additionally, she thinks my statement about doing my duty and wanting to take care of myself comes across as selfish and is not something a parent should say. She believes there is a reasonable compromise. Instead of giving her the full $50K, we can offer her half for the wedding. This way, we can cover most of the expenses from our savings, borrow the rest from Sarah if needed, and pay her back within a year. I told her right away that I was not going to do that. I told her that we could separate our finances and that she could return to work full-time to help Jessica pay for the wedding. However, I made it clear that I was done. As selfish as it may seem, I don't feel obligated to Jessica anymore, and I want to enjoy my life while I still can. She replied, as she always does, that I am stubborn, and she would take that step if it meant keeping the family together. I told her it was fine, but not to come to me complaining about her health when she went back to work full-time. A couple of days ago, she came to me and said that she agreed with my proposal. We made a plan to open a joint bank account, where we would deposit our monthly expenses. After that, we can each use our personal money however we like. We decided on an amount to keep in our savings account for emergencies, and agreed to split the remaining funds 50 by 50. I even agreed to cover 60% of the money needed for our joint expenses. This is the first time we will have more than one bank account, so I'm a bit nervous about how it will turn out. I also believe she mentioned talking to her boss about working more hours, but I want to avoid getting involved in that discussion. I spoke with Sarah and expressed my concerns about giving Jessica any money, which I believe is a bad idea. However, Sarah insists that she wants to help. She mentioned that while she agrees with my viewpoint, she doesn't want their mom to return to work full-time. She clarified that her decision to help was aimed at supporting their mom, not Jessica. I told her that it was her money and she could do as she pleased. But like her mom, I wouldn't involve myself in the situation any further. Right before I wrote this post, I sent an email to Jessica expressing my feelings for her. I clarified where I stood and mentioned that she could decide how involved I would be in her wedding. I don't expect a reply, but now I'll have to wait and see what happens. Edit! I realize now that I didn't explain something clearly. My wife wants to pay $25,000 for the wedding, which she and Sarah have agreed to split. She believes this is a reasonable compromise, but I disagree with her. OP is an AH for being unfair to one of his daughter. He should maintain a balance between both daughters. So, I would rate OP 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. OP's daughter Jessica is not an AH, so I would rate her 0 out of 5. Let's now move on to the next story from medical-bedroom-5243. AITA for telling my mom she won't be able to see my daughter for 2 months after she's born if she calls my wife to complain about her birth plan again. I 33am. My wife is currently 7 months pregnant with our daughter. The first time she was pregnant, she went into premature labor and had a stillbirth. It was a devastating experience for both of us, but especially my sweet wife. She's finally getting excited about this pregnancy, but there is a part of her that is afraid to get her hopes up in case something goes wrong. She asks me several times a day if I think something will happen and has been having nightmares about having another stillbirth. Luckily, her doctor says everything is going well so far, and I'm confident everything will work out okay this time. My wife and I are from the same town, but live around 9 hours driving distance from our families. Right now, the plan is for my wife's mother to drive up once my wife goes into labor. She's going to support my wife during the labor and also stay for a week or so after the baby is born to help us get settled. My wife explicitly said that she doesn't want any visitors aside from her mom for the first few weeks after the baby is born. She told me wants my family to visit a few weeks after the baby is born, and even said my parents could stay in the guest room so they get more quality time with their granddaughter once we're ready for visitors. I truly just want this process to go as smoothly as possible for my wife in light of what she went through the last time around, and so I'm 100% behind whatever plan makes her feel the most comfortable. Yesterday, I got a call from my mom asking about the birth plan. I explained our current plan, and my mom said that she and my dad would drive up once my wife goes into labor. She didn't mention being in the delivery room, but said they'd be in the waiting room to meet their granddaughter. She also said they'd stay at a hotel nearby, and so they could spend time with the baby once she's home. I told my mom that we're excited for her to come up and meet the baby, but we'd prefer if she wait a few weeks until we're settled. My mom said that my mother-in-law is coming up right after the birth, and so she doesn't understand why she can't be there. I explained that my mother-in-law is there to support my wife during the labor and help her get settled after the baby is born. I added that my wife obviously feels more comfortable with her mom and doesn't feel pressure to have the house spotless and be the perfect hostess when her mom comes over. I also said that we want her and my dad to get a lot of time with the baby, and we don't know how my wife is going to be feeling immediately after the birth. My mom started rambling about how boy's mom always gets the short end of the stick, and everyone should be included when it comes to major milestones, like the birth of a child. The funny thing is that my younger sister had her first baby about 6 months ago. She can't stand her MIL, and she still hasn't given her the green light to come and visit. My mom and my sister have both justified this by saying her MIL rude and difficult to be around. This is true. But also, my sister holds grudges and doesn't get along with most relatives. I responded to my mom by asking why she's okay with my sister keeping her baby away from her MIL for 6 months if everyone should be included. My mom was furious. She said that there was more to the situation than I realize, and that this situation is completely different since she's always been perfectly nice to my wife. I asked what I was missing, and my mom just said that my sister's mother-in-law ruined her bridal shower by bringing her obnoxious friends. I said regardless of the situation, I want to make this experience as stress-free as possible for my wife given what happened last time. I said that she just wants me and my mom for a while, and I understand her perspective. I told my mom I love her and am excited for her to visit, and we'll make sure she gets plenty of time with her granddaughter. She seemed disappointed, but I thought we were on the same page. A few hours ago, My wife told me that she got a call from my mother. She said my mom was crying and saying she felt excluded and like we didn't want her to meet the baby. My wife is a sweetheart and a people pleaser, and she truly took this to heart. She seemed stressed and asked me if we were doing the right thing. I told my wife I wanted her to feel as comfortable as possible and that I'd deal with my mom moving forward. I was furious, to say the least. The stress isn't good for my wife, and she's already under a lot of it because of her fears that history will repeat itself. I called my mom back and told her that if she calls my wife about the situation again, she won't get to see the baby for 2 months. I said I'd add a month for every call after that. I meant this kind of as a joke, but I was being serious that she can't be putting this stress on my wife right now. My mom said we were excluding her and my father, and that they raised me better than this. My dad called and said I was wrong to give my mom an ultimatum and punish her for expressing her feelings. He said that I was using time with the baby as a form of control. I explained that I want them to have a good relationship with my kid, but I desperately don't want any extra stress on my wife right now. My dad says I owe my mom an apology for saying I'll add months to the wait time every time she speaks to my wife about the birth plan. I disagree. AITA? OP is not an AH for giving an ultimatum to his mother and setting boundaries for his family. OP's mother is an AH for being dramatic here. OP and his family need space. Instead of giving them space, she is creating a drama. As for scores, I would rate the OP's mother 2 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to next story from Apple Goose 1107. AITA. If I, 34F, cut all ties with my mother, 54F, after she admitted her beliefs about unaliving oneself? Some background info in my teens and into early adulthood. I struggled with bipolar tendencies, depression, self-harm, and attempts to unalive myself. It was a tough journey to figure out what was behind it all. But to sum it up, between the ages of 4 and 6, my egg donor would hang out a local trucker gas station to pick up guys. She, still married to my dad, would then bring these strange men to the house and let them have their way with me. She would lock me in my room with a training potty. She'd go days without actually feeding me. My dad, who was at work during these events, would come home to either A, unlock the door to find me naked, malnourished, and soiled, or B, hiding under the dining room table with a gallon of milk and a container of bologna. Needless to say, my dad divorced her and won full custody knowing all of the crap she's done to me. Except the trucker boyfriends, which was revealed during one of my hospital stays. About 2 years ago, things between my parents started to get heated and resulted in my mom storming out of the house to go for a drive. My dad went into the garage and was rigging up a noose with a belt. Something told my mom to come home and caught him before he climbed up the ladder. She took him to the hospital where my dad stayed for about 2 weeks. Fast forward to a few months ago when my dad calls me and asks if he can live in our spare bedroom for 4 weeks as my mother has kicked him out of the house. Turns out they had a huge fight 2 weeks before. They agreed that my dad was 80% at fault and my mom was 20%. My dad apologized to her and even wrote her a letter explaining his apology, feelings, plan to be better, etc. She read it numerous times and it even made her cry. For those 2 weeks, my mom said that he was doing perfectly and everything was getting better, but she decided that she was still mad at him and needed space away from him, so she kicked him out. My mom wasn't too happy when she found out we let him move in, saying that he needed space to think about himself. After a week, she asked a friend of hers, who owns an Airbnb, to let him stay there for the remainder of their separation. He reluctantly does, just to keep the peace, despite not being able to bring his dog with him. It's a longer drive to his work, and it was more expensive to stay there rather than with family. Given that a big part of their fights was over money and how much they've been spending over the years, I found this rather odd, but trying to be a supportive daughter to both sides, I didn't say anything. My dad likes to get things done and make people happy. So anytime my mom would say things like, "Some French doors for the closet would be lovely," or "We should update all the doors," my dad will shop around for quotes and do everything he can to make that happen. Meanwhile, my mom will suddenly forget that she even said those things. My mom also designed the entire kitchen remodel and master bathroom remodel, but years later claimed she never wanted to do it. After a few days of living in the Airbnb, my mom tells him that he can come back home after only 2 weeks of being separated. During the week that my dad lived with us, he has told us his side of the story, and how he interpreted and felt about everything, while my mom consistently avoided the subject. We had asked both of my parents to come over and discuss things, just as we did when my dad got out of the hospital. My dad explained, or attempted to, his feelings and interpretation of their actions, discussions, etc. I say attempted because anytime he says something that didn't match exactly what my mom thinks happened, she'd start yelling at him and called him a liar. This is something that she would do to me and my siblings growing up and would force my dad to support her in these accusations. My mom then retracts her offer for my dad to move back in and says the new date would be sometime in 2025. My dad, now finding it even harder to trust her, started thinking about a new living situation. He gave my mom a couple options of either living with us or to let him buy a house, which they can rent out when he's allowed to move back in. My mom wanted him to stay in the Airbnb for a month, but forgot that the weekly rate was $3,000. My dad said no. My mom came back with if he stops talking to us about their marital problems, he would be allowed at our house. So now my dad is back with us, he's back with his dog, and not hemorrhaging rent money. Every few days or so, the two of them would talk about what they were going to do to fix the marriage, and with each time, it doesn't seem to get any better. My mom tells him he can't talk to us. He can only talk to his friends, which is just one, and at the time was going through a hurricane. All of their mutual friends have already talked to my mom, and none of them have reached out to get his side of the story. So, he really didn't have anyone, and talked to us anyway. Being tossed around like this, and knowing what would happen if he bottled up his feelings again, he caved and vented to us anyway. He came to the conclusion that since not living with my mom, he didn't feel like he was always walking on eggshells. He could breathe again, and decided to go house hunting. He did try to find a duplex, but there were none available in the area, but he did find a few single-family homes. One of them he loved. It has everything he has ever wanted in a house. He put in an offer. They accepted. Closing date set for just before Thanksgiving. Some details we did manage to get from my mom. They apparently tried to have couples therapy, but claimed it didn't work. She refused to elaborate on that. Instead, they each have separate therapists. So there's work being done on the individuals, but nothing for the marriage. When my dad's attempt in the garage happened, she didn't think much of it, other than my dad needed help. Then she talked about the incident to her therapist, and everything changed. She convinced my mom that he did it intentionally to hurt her and won't let that go. She believes that trauma doesn't last forever, maybe a few months, but then you should get over it. Anytime she gets upset with someone, she likes to bring up old mistakes and thinks there's nothing wrong with that. The therapist didn't convince my mom to do that bit. She's been doing that to me for years. So now that my dad is all excited about this house, has started to prep where furniture is going, and buying household items, my mom gets a phone call from the mortgage company and lets the cat out of the bag on the house he's getting. It's not the duplex that she wanted. Her response was to invite him over for a talk, but didn't mention that the pastor would be there. My dad was surprised, but thought that maybe she did this as sort of marriage counseling. Oh no, it wasn't that. He was there to convince Dad not to get the house. He was there to ask my dad questions about what my mom thinks is wrong with him, and not there to fix the marriage. There was one question where the pastor tried to redirect the talk towards the marriage. What does love mean to you? My dad answered. But my mom claimed she wasn't ready to answer that question. This attempt didn't stop my dad from buying the house. It actually ended up pushing him so far away from her that he decided that he never wanted to live under the same roof as her again. At this point, I'm so annoyed with my mother. My husband tries the voice of reason between the two, but knows it's ultimately in my parents' hands. I've been asking my mom for her side of the story this entire time, and if she does give me an answer on why she's not sharing, it's because she doesn't want me to hate my dad. She doesn't think that it's having the exact opposite effect. Her last-ditch attempt at stopping the sale was serving my dad with divorce papers on his birthday. She knows that he hasn't had very good birthdays growing up, and so he never really plans anything. My mom thinks that all the birthdays she's done for him should have erased all that. My mom came by in the afternoon a few days ago, saying she was ready to tell me more details after getting permission from her therapist. I had just a few items to get clarity on. Was it true that after Dad accepted majority of the fault, apologized, wrote a detailed letter, and was praised by you on how good he was doing, you still kicked him out because you couldn't get over your anger? Her answer was that he decided the percentage of fault. His apology wasn't really an apology. She does still have the letter, and doesn't think he was actually better. Was it true that when the pastor asked the question, Dad fully answered, "But you claimed you weren't ready"? Her answer is a bit hazy in my memory, but it went with the flow of question 1. Is it true that you actually believe that Dad was only trying to hurt you when he attempted to unalive himself? Her answer, yes. Do you believe that when I was going through my deep depression and attempting to unalive myself, that my goal was to hurt you? Her answer, yes. Luckily, it was in the afternoon, and she didn't want to be around when my dad came home, so she left before I could ask her to leave. I've never felt so betrayed, so lied to, so manipulated, so disrespected. I can barely even look at her picture without wanting to yell. I have 2 small kids that love her. She hasn't done anything to them that I know of. My husband has told my mum that I don't want to be left alone with her for a while. She's also been uninvited to Thanksgiving to keep the peace. I've made her a present for Christmas already, and I think I can still give it to her, but only in passing. I don't think I can spend Christmas with her either. Right now, I'd be okay if I never saw her again. Wibta if I cut all ties with her. Edit. The egg donor is my biological mom, a piece of garbage, and never wanted me in the first place. As soon as the divorce was final, I never seen or heard from her again. My mom is my stepmom, but also has adopted me, and it's her name on my birth certificate, not egg donors, so that's why I called her mom. OP is not an AH for going no contact with his stepmother. OP's reaction is 100% justified. OP's stepmother is an AH for being manipulative and controlling. So I would rate her 3.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale.